Hello and welcome to another SysAid webinar. I'm Michael, the Customer Community Manager, and today we're going to be talking about cloud and the road of IT service management. Remember, if you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to reach out to us either on Facebook or on Twitter at SysAid using hashtag webinar. Today we have a special guest star, Forrester analyst, co-author of the CMDB Imperative, and eclectic music lover, Glenn O'Donnell. Glenn, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Michael. Very good to be here with you today.
Great. Well, we're happy to have you. So to get started, let's just start off with what's your opinion of cloud and ITSM and what's going to be happening in the future?
Well, cloud, of course, is everywhere. Everybody's talking about all aspects of cloud this and cloud that. And there's an awful lot of silliness circulating around about cloud as well. And one of the silly developments is, this whole notion of how cloud relates to service management or vice versa. Most notably, a lot of people saying, well, as we go to cloud computing, that means we have to deal with less and less of the underlying infrastructure. So therefore, we don't really have to deal with this service management stuff anymore. Nothing could be further from the truth, because cloud just represents another form factor, if you will, for getting the underlying technology. It's another business model, but you're still dealing with yet another building block for the higher level services that you're trying to construct and deliver. So service management is not only still relevant, it's more relevant than it's ever been. However, we do have to change some of the thinking and some of the language as we go about talking about this stuff.
So really, with IT service management, you're still delivering a service, and it really doesn't matter what that underlying infrastructure is. You still have to take that into account. And in some cases, couldn't cloud make that more difficult, since now you're relying on other vendors who are managing that infrastructure for you, and it's harder to control things with SLAs and be able to meet deadlines, so on and so forth?
Well, you certainly do have to be more specific about the SLAs and expectations of what it is you're getting. So if I go to pick your cloud provider, xyz.com cloud provider, we're going to have to make sure that XYZ delivers what we expect and as we expect it. We've got to have in place some sort of expectations on things like availability and performance. But, for the most part, we don't worry much about that until we have some real business critical stuff sitting on that service. And therein lies the real issue. If you've got something that, has demands that cannot be met by a cloud service, and let's face it, cloud, it's a wonderful thing, but it's not the solution to everything. But if you have, something that demands expectations that cannot be delivered by a particular cloud provider, well, then you don't use cloud for that. Here again, cloud is just another option. I can have a physical server in my data center, or I can have infrastructure as a service from XYZ, but we still got to deal with that thing the same way. There is, as we call it, an uneven handshake with cloud providers that, some of what we're trying to do with these things is not going to change that much. Things like securing the infrastructure, things like putting the applications on this infrastructure, that's still stuff that we own. So we have to be very careful about how we specify these expectations and be clear about what the cloud provider can deliver, because much of it is still on our shoulders.
So with the cloud technology obviously being very prevalent, especially over the past few years, it's been gaining a lot of momentum. How's that fitting into some other movements out there? Like there's DevOps, for example, taking on more agile. Some talk of IT service management is dead or dying, or those sorts of things. How does that all kind of fit in together, and will IT service management survive this type of transition? What will happen to ITIL in that respect?
Yeah, well, this is really the crux of the whole discussion of, is ITIL dead, which comes up a lot. And ITIL, first and foremost, ITIL may be on its way out. As a term, we may stop talking about ITIL, but we'll never really stop thinking about the principles behind it and the philosophies of service management. And in fact, what we do is we keep reinventing it. So we have ITIL for operations. We've got SDLC for the developers, and some of them are going to Agile now. And, Agile is kind of throwing a lot of the discipline out the window if you take a purist perspective of it. But in reality, they're all of these initiatives are really chasing the same thing. And the latest is now DevOps. So people realize finally getting smarter about the fact that Dev and Ops have to stop hitting each other, that these two are organizational entities that are collaborating in the delivery of services.
And it seems like with that and that notion, I mean, people have been trying to get Dev and Ops to collaborate for, several years. It's kind of like, why now is it such a big deal?
One word: velocity. It is the speed at which we're now being required to act. If it takes 2 weeks to spin up an environment for a developer, and that developer is practicing agile development methodologies, well, 2 weeks is way too long. And this is where cloud is stepping in. A developer says 2 weeks. Well, I can go to XYZ and I can get this in 5 minutes. Why do I need you? And indeed, we do have that factor where people are doing an end around. They're actually circumventing IT, so-called shadow IT, which is a dangerous thing unto itself if there's no governance around it. And ultimately, we will see that cloud services will be used for various reasons, but we do have to put the governance around it. But governance doesn't mean control. Governance doesn't mean I, the IT guy, I'm going to control everything. I'm going to pull all the knobs and press all the switches, because a lot of that is going to be outside of my control. But I am still responsible for making sure that the assets of my company are still well protected and that my customers are being served appropriately.
Okay. And, I agree with you as well. I mean, with IT service management, we need that governance. We need to make sure that there's no security problems. I mean, Heartbleed was a big technology security hole, and so trying to keep control of those sorts of things as well. But really, I want to go back to the concept of ITIL being dead or dying. In my opinion, ITIL is almost kind of like an archival system of best practice. I mean, they've always been publicized as this is best practice. Well, best practice is the type of thing that has to be done for a while, and then people say, yes, this is good. We'll go ahead and put it now into the library. So isn't it possible that with DevOps and cloud that eventually it's going to fit more and more into ITIL, and that type of library will continue on?
Well, yes. And, what it really boils down to is all of these things at their very core are about common sense. And unfortunately, common sense isn't that common. Because what happens is, and ITIL is a great example, what happens is people take a good idea and they take it too far. They'll take something like change management, which let's be obvious that change management is something we've got to do well. It turns out it's something we're not doing well. So what do? We put in place a process. Okay, that's good. We need a process. But then people say, well, we've got to control the process and we've got to put all these draconian controls in there. You will not move forward until you go through the change advisory board and you check all these check marks off. Well, let's not make it too overbearing, because then it becomes bureaucracy. And if ITIL has a black eye for anything, it's become overwhelming bureaucracy by the ITIL elites, and that's why ITIL has a black eye. ITIL, again, coming back to the principles of what it represents, are sound, they're profound. This is all great stuff, but if you take it too far and you turn it into a religion, then you've got problems. And unfortunately, that's a lot of what's happened with ITIL. And that's, I think, the only reason why ITIL will die as a term. It's also kind of a dumb term. It doesn't represent what it used to. IT infrastructure library, that never quite made sense, and it's not even used. Yeah, and it's not even. That's not even. I mean, that reference is dead as well. Nobody really talks about it as being IT infrastructure library. It's just ITIL or ITIL, whichever preference you like.
So it's gone too far. It's gotten too convoluted, complicated, and maybe past the point of really getting a good return on investment. And so now we need to move forward and maybe look at, other practices, or maybe, just information and knowledge being out there and shared amongst each other and maybe not put into a concrete library.
Yeah, and we don't want ITIL had there's a lot of great material there, and I wholeheartedly endorse what ITIL is all about, and I endorse the principles that are published in the ITIL books. But there is a bit of quite a bit of ITIL that is still ambiguous. It's not really clear what it means. CMDB is a great example. What is this darn CMDB thing anyway? Well, I've written on it and I speak a lot about it, and I've got a lot of battle scars. But the biggest problem with CMDB was ITIL never really clarified what it was, so everybody sort of invented it their own way. And we need ITIL to evolve to be more prescriptive. And that's where we start bringing in some of that cross-pollination with other initiatives like COBIT, like DevOps, like Agile. And eventually this does become more prescriptive. People resist that because they say, well, I'm special. I'm not like the other guys. Well, you have a lot more in common with the other guys than you think. So let's be more prescriptive. And if you are more prescriptive, you can pretty much say this is a good change management process. We'll tweak it here and there, but for the most part, this is it. I'll do change management just like you'll do change management. And then we can start automating more of it and codifying it into software. These are all parts of the evolution as we go forward. And as cloud and other new technology options come on the market and become more prominent, we're going to need more and more of this, because each time we do this, we increase the velocity. And we're just moving at a blistering pace right now. And this is still just the tip of the iceberg. We're going to start moving a lot faster.
Really. So I know we've brought up DevOps a couple times already. And DevOps to me is almost kind of like a cultural shift, trying to break down silos. So does it seem like that really has always been an underlying issue, and now the technology is finally catching up to where we can finally start changing the way we work and moving faster, and going outside of ITIL and all those sorts of things?
Yeah, well, DevOps really isn't anything remarkably new. It is something that we've been doing since the days of the Colossus and the ENIAC. Ever since there have been computers, we've been doing release management, and we've had people doing development. We've had people doing operations. Sometimes it's the same person wearing both hats, but as you get bigger, it's different people. And this is good old-fashioned organizational dynamics where one group will form its own little clique and another group will form its own little clique, and these cliques don't get along. So it takes good leadership to overcome that. And we talk a lot about automating this and that and standardizing and all kinds of other aspects of DevOps that do make sense. But if you can't get Dev and Ops to stop hating each other in the first place, then all bets are off. That other stuff is not going to pan out as you expected.
Okay, which makes perfect sense as well. Everyone should be working together. But we did bring up one other great buzzword that's kind of coming into prevalence now. We also brought up shadow IT. So how do you think that's going to play out? Because right now, in my opinion, shadow IT is one of those things of end users or people out there trying to go around IT to just figure something out. And for whatever reason, IT is not able to meet the need. So what do you think is going to happen as this gets bigger and bigger?
Well, shadow IT exists for a reason, and the reason is IT is not delivering. Plain and simple. So we've got to take a look at the root cause there. Why are they going elsewhere, and what can we do to serve the business better? Because shadow IT is just business people who are trying to get a job done, and will exercise whatever tools they have at their disposal. So we have to be the provider of the tools in IT. What's interesting about shadow IT, however, is, and I predict we're going to see quite a bit of this, shadow IT breaks off and does their own thing, and before you know it, they are IT, because suddenly they've got to start looking at things like governance, and they've got to secure their systems, and they've got to worry about patches and updates and all kinds of other things that IT has to deal with. So at some point they realize, oh no, we've become IT ourselves, and now we've got the same problems, and we're becoming just like them, just as slow, just as much bureaucracy, and so on. And eventually they will merge. In fact, I started my IT career by being shadow IT. And we grew to a point where we said, hey, we are now IT. In fact, we grew bigger than IT and eventually merged it all back together.
So I came through the service desk, and we always loved the idea of end users being able to do their own things in IT, and we can get left alone to playing our computer games or whatever. But it sounds like you're saying it's just more of a cycle where it's going to merge and then it's going to come back out again and merge.
Yeah, we're probably going to see a lot of this play out. It does come in waves. But the technologists, start packaging more of this technology, we are empowering our employees more and more to do things on their own. You don't need IT to install an app on your smartphone. You do that on your own because the smartphone developers, Apple and Android devices and so on, they've got all of that built in. So you don't need to be a technology expert to make it happen. We need to hide the gory details of the technology so it is consumable by mere mortals. And we have to do that internally as well. Inside the corporate enterprise, we've got to look at it the same way. We've got to hide the complexity so that we can empower people. In some ways, that helps foster so-called shadow IT, because maybe people now figure, hey, I can do this technology stuff on my own. And let's face it, it is pretty easy for you, me, anybody to go out and provision cloud services. But we have to look at what we're going to do with those cloud services and how we're going to protect our company's interest, and how we're going to really put governance around it. Not control, but governance. And that's a different animal. We're still going to need somebody to own that element of it.
So, Glenn, so it sounds like there's a lot that's going to be happening in the future for IT service management, a lot for ITIL. And do you have any closing thoughts as far as what you think the overall message should be then when it comes to cloud IT service management and how companies can deal with it in the future?
Yeah, this is in some ways a little bit of same old, just in a different wrapper. But because service management again is going to be relevant and important as we go forward, whether the technology is delivered via cloud or whether it's delivered good old-fashioned server or hamsters on a wheel, it doesn't matter. The service is the service of the service, and we build it using these things as building blocks. So service management is going to evolve and is going to be relevant and important as we go forward, because if we don't practice service management, the services that we're delivering are not going to be trustworthy. And that's really what it comes down to.
So focus on delivering your services, focus on delivering value, ignore just trying to deliver technology.
Yes, and try not to get too religious about this stuff. The ITIL books are not holy scripture. They're just merely guidance for doing the right thing and using some common sense, which again isn't all that common.
That's a good. I love that statement as well. So, Glenn, thank you very much for your time. It was really great to speak with you, and look forward to talking with you in the future, of course. And thank you for joining us in today's webinar. Remember, you can reach out to us on social media on Facebook and on Twitter at SysAid with #webinar. Thank you.